Alright, this is lesson 36, and the topic is subtracting fractions and mixed numbers from whole numbers. So I want you to write down the lesson number and also the topic here for your notebooks. Alright, so first of all, let's just kind of talk about what this topic is. Let's see, subtracting fractions and or mixed numbers from whole numbers. Now we know that whole numbers are just numbers that don't have a fraction to it. For example, 4 is a whole number. And what we're going to do is we're going to subtract fractions from whole numbers like that, or subtract mixed numbers from whole numbers like this. All right, let's talk about, let's set this up before we look at some of the examples. When you've got a whole number, remember that you can represent a whole number some different ways. So for example, I was using 4 as my whole number. Now, if I say I borrowed 1 from 4, if I took 1 away from 4, what's left? Well, 3 is left. Now, the 1 I borrowed, I could represent as 2 over 2. So for example, 3 and 2 over 2 is the same thing as 4, because what's 2 over 2? 1, right? And then what's 1 plus 3? 4. So all I've done is I've renamed it or written 4 a different way. Now I also could have borrowed 1 from 4, and I could have represented the 1 I borrowed as 7 over 7, because 7 over 7 is 1, right? I can represent one whole part a lot of different ways. In fact, I can represent it unlimited ways. I could represent it as 7 over 7. I could represent it 8 over 8. I could even represent borrowing that 1 and representing it as 50 over 50, because 50 over 50 is 1, and what's 1 and 3? 4. So just kind of keep that in mind, how we can rename a whole number. Now let's take a look at example 1. We're going to subtract, we're going to take a whole number, and we're going to subtract a mixed number from it. Now, I certainly can take 3 minus 2, that's easy, but the problem is here is I can't take a half away from nothing. There's nothing up there. I can't take, for example, if somebody asks you for $1 and you don't have $1, you can't do it. So what I need to do here is I need to rename the 3. So I'm going to take 1, and in this section, you're always going to take 1. All right, so what's left? Well, if I take 1 away from 3, that leaves 2. Now I want to take that 1 I borrowed, and I want to make sure I represent that 1 I borrowed in a way that's easy to subtract this fraction down here. And I'm going to rename it as 2 over 2. The reason is because my denominator is 2. So I want to make sure that I rename it with 2's. That way when I subtract these, I have a common denominator. So how do you add and subtract fractions with the same denominator? Well, it keeps the same denominator. Now what's 2 minus 1? 1. What's 2 minus 2? 0 or nothing. And I don't need to put a 0 there. I just leave it as nothing. So my answer then is 1/2. Now, remember, how would I check a subtraction problem? What's the opposite of subtraction? Adding. So to check this, we will add this to this. Well, what's 2.5 and another half? Yep, I get 3. All right, example 2. Now this time, we're taking that whole number, and we're going to subtract a fraction from it. Notice I didn't put the fraction right underneath the whole number, because I need to line it up. So in other words, this column right here is whole numbers. This column over here are my fractions. Now, I can't take 1/4 away from nothing, right? So I got to rename the 2. I'm going to borrow 1. Hey, I'm working with 4, so I want to rename that 1 I borrowed as 4 over 4. Now you can subtract. Remember to add or subtract fractions with the same denominator. You keep the same denominator, 4. What's 4 minus 1? 3. What's 1 minus nothing? 1. So my answer is 1 3/4. All right, example 3, 4 minus 2 1/4. I borrow 1, that leaves 3. I'm working with 4's, so the 1 I borrowed I'll name as 4 over 4. Subtract 1 3/4. All right, example 4. 3 minus 5/12. Again, notice I didn't line these up because 3 is a whole number, 5/12 is a fraction. I can't take 5/12 away from nothing. I borrow. I'm working with 12s, so the one I borrowed, I'll call it 12 over 12. Now subtract. 12 minus 5, 7. 2 minus nothing. 2 take away nothing, you have 2 left. All right, example 5, 10 minus 2 and 1/2. I can't take a half away from nothing. All right, I borrow. I'm working with 2's right there. So let's call the one I borrowed as 2 over 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. 9 minus 2, 7. All right, example 6, another example. 6 minus 1 and 3/10. I can't take 3/10 away from nothing, borrow. I'm working with 10s, I always look at the denominator. So let's call the one I borrowed 10 over 10, right? Because that's 1. So, let's see, 10 minus 3 is 7, 5 minus 1 is 4 and 7/10. All right, last example, read through this as I read through it. There were 4 whole pies on the shelf. The server took 1 5/6 of them. How many were left on the shelf? So there were 4, the server took away 1 5/6. Same type of problem, isn't it? I cannot take 5/6 away from nothing, I borrow. I'm working with 6's, so I call the one I borrowed 6 over 6. 3 minus 1, 2 and 1/6. So there were 2 and 1/6 pies left on the shelf. All right, so again, our topic here was taking a whole number and subtracting a fraction or a mixed number from it.